ideals. And out of that diametrical opposition, what conclusion can you derive? And is that conclusion a valid conclusion? And if not, why not? This is substance of the second paragraph. A dialectical reasoning which contrasts the ideal with the actualities, derives a conclusion, questions that conclusion, and arrives at a final conclusion. This is dialectical movement of the second paragraph. Now let me read out. These persistent ideals of the race are at once the contradiction of its normal experience and the affirmation of higher and deeper experiences which are abnormal to humanity and only to be attained in their organized entirety by a revolutionary individual effort or an evolutionary general progression. You see the dialectical movement. The ideal and the actual are contrasted. And yet the ideal is therefore not immediately defeated, because that ideal is realizable. Many individuals in the history have revolutionized themselves, and in spite of all the contradictions of the actualities, by that effort, that has been sustained. Now what is that contrast? The ideal and the actual. These 4 lines which are given, they are the summary of the acutest contrast in the world. The most quintessential contrast, contradiction that we find in the world is now stated here. To know, possess, and be the divine being in an animal and egoistic consciousness. To convert our twilight or obscure physical mentality into the plenary supramental illumination. To build peace and a self-existent bliss where there is only a stress of transitory satisfactions, besieged by physical pain and emotional suffering. To establish an infinite freedom in a world which presents itself as a group of mechanical necessities. To discover and realize the immortal life in a body subject to death and constant mutation. This is offered to us as the manifestation of God in matter and the goal of nature in a terrestrial evolution. These are the great contrasting facts. To know, to possess, and to be, this is the highest urge of man. To know, to possess, and to be. There is no greater satisfaction that man wants accepting this. And he doesn't know where he can get. But his present actual condition is quite different. This is something that cannot be. This, to know, to possess and be the divine being in an animal and egoistic consciousness. As long as we remain ego, we cannot know, we cannot possess, we cannot be. It's an impossibility. And yet this is where we are. And this is all the time we are constantly seeking for. The two contrasting facts. The most contrasting facts in the world is that this egoistic consciousness, which can never be, it is that which aspires to be. Then, to convert our twilight or obscure physical mentality into plenary supramental illumination. Our present mentality is a physical mentality. It is twilight mentality. It is sandhya. It is neither complete darkness nor a complete knowledge. It's a twilight. In that twilight and even obscure consciousness, we want to have complete knowledge. That is the whole search of man, to be completely illumined, without any doubt, shadow of doubt. That knowledge he wants to possess. To build peace and self-existent bliss, where there is only a stress of transitory satisfactions, besieged by physical pain and emotional suffering. This is a description of our own being, emotional suffering, besieged constantly by physical pain, and even when the pleasure is there, it is only transitory. Transitory satisfactions, besieged by physical pain and emotional suffering. In that temple of poverty, we want to build peace and self-existent bliss. To establish an infinite freedom in a world which presents itself as a group of mechanical necessities. The world is a world of necessity, mechanical necessities. There are laws made in the world. Mechanical necessities are built up. VIP car cannot be overcrossed. It's a mechanical necessity. And if you cross it, the human aspiration will fly against you and will say, you are breaking my right, inherent right of freedom. And this is the law of freedom that establishes itself as a great revolt against mechanical necessities. And this is everywhere. The whole world is up against mechanical necessities. We are suffering under those mechanical necessities. We are there bound. We ourselves create those necessities. We want to be bound by them. We revolt against the revolts, and yet we are revolting against those revolts. Why? Because we are seeking infinite freedom. This is our seeking. We are seeking infinite. We are the children of freedom. Amritasya putraha. So to establish an infinite freedom in a world which presents itself as a group of mechanical necessities, to discover and realize the immortal life in a body subjected to death and constant mutation. We know that we are going to die, and yet we don't want it. We want to have immortality. To discover and realize the immortal life in a body subject to death and constant mutation. This is offered to us as the manifestation of God in matter and the goal of nature in her terrestrial evolution. Now, having stated this contrast, this thesis and antithesis now presented, both are in antithetical relationship, one side and the other. Now the argument, to the ordinary material intellect, which takes its present organization of consciousness for the limit of its possibilities, the direct contradiction of the unrealized ideals with the realized fact is a final argument against their validity. That is to say, these ideals are bound to be denied, to be valid. Why? Because we take our normal stand on our material organization of consciousness. And we think it is final. We take our present mentality to be the final mentality, as if it is the final. And we argue that because the actual is in direct contradiction with the ideal, therefore ideal is false. This is real. What I see is real. That is a dream and never to be realized. Because how can it be? This is all that is going to be, and this is the permanent thing here. The material intellect takes its present organization of consciousness as the final limit, rightly or wrongly, but materialistic intellect which is in us, we are all materialists basically, because whether we like it or not, our intellect is material, is bound by the material physical body. That material intellect, whenever it sees an ideal, it is bound to dismiss it as saying, oh my Lord, it's a dream, it can never be true, invalid. And it is the final argument. Even the great spiritual people, when they are on the verge of physical mortality, they find physical mortality to be the real fact, and all the search for immortality, amritatvam, it seems to be a dream. In imagination one has gone into it, because the real fact is only this. So, to the material intellect, that which is actual and now seems to be the ultimate, nothing more than this. And that death is a real fact, immortality is an imagination, dream. Therefore, that dream is invalid. For philosophically, therefore, this is the argument, that this thesis and antithesis ends in a conclusion that what is actual is real, what is ideal is unreal, and therefore it cannot be valid. This is the conclusion. It's a part of dialectical reasoning. Now this dialectical reasoning, Aurobindo goes further, and he says that this conclusion can be further invalidated. But if we take a more deliberate view of the world's workings, that direct opposition appears rather as a part of nature's profoundest method and the seal of her completest sanction. Now this statement is a very important statement. It's a turn in the argument, philosophical argument. If we take, he doesn't say we must take. Philosophy is not an inevitable preoccupation of man. You may become philosopher, you may not. But if you want to be a philosopher, If you want a philosophical argument, then this is the philosophical argument. If we take a more deliberate view, what's the meaning of a deliberate view? A deliberate view of nature is that nature is not arbitrary. Nothing is arbitrary. There's a meaning in it. Everything has a meaning in the world. There's a rationality. Rationality is reasonableness, to see reasonableness everywhere. There is no cloud and yet it is raining. It's not possible. If it rains without a cloud, it's not reasonable. There must be a cloud before a rain takes place. It's not arbitrary. If some child says, why does it raining? I say, because there's a cloud, my child. I say that it's not arbitrarily happening. I take a deliberate view. Nothing in the world happens just arbitrarily. So if there is a contrast between this actual fact and that ideal, and if you take a deliberate view of it, why is it? Why is there this contrast at all? This is the question. Why is there a contrast? Then you are led to inquire into the method of nature's working. This is a new argument in a philosophical world. In the philosophical thought, it's a new argument. If you take a more deliberate view of the nature's methods of working, nature's method is philosophical, is rational movements. There is a method in it. Even if there is madness, there is a method in the madness. This method of nature is a very interesting method. This very method is the method of contrast. The very method of nature's working is to state which only conceals very resolutely something that is very difficult to reveal, but it is precisely that which is going to be revealed. That's a method of nature. If you examine the whole history of mankind, the complete, not only of mankind, but the whole history of evolution, this is the method. If you examine the very method of nature's working, जहाँ इनकार है वहीं इकरार है. Where there is a complete negation, there is the real agreement. The nature starts with a negation. The very method of nature is negation. As it moves on and on, you knock and knock and knock. The exact opposite will be revealed itself out. This argument is what I call the quintessential metaphysical argument. If there is one metaphysical argument, it is to look into the deliberate. Metaphysical argument is an argument to look deliberately into the deliberate methods of nature. And then if you knock with that argument, then you will find that that ideal, which is now denied by the actuality, is the only thing that is going to be established. That is through metaphysical reasoning, which wants to look into the very natural movements of nature. The one inevitable thing is that that which is being denied is the very thing which is going to be affirmed. In the next paragraph, Aurobindo enunciates this method. of nature. He establishes his method of nature. If you are tired, we shall stop here. If you are not tired, I'll finish this third paragraph. Depends upon the fatigue.
It's okay.
Huh?
We can continue.
Okay? What is that method of nature? Now Sri Aurobindo describes the very method of nature. And he starts by saying, all problems of existence are essentially problems of harmony. This is the nature of all the problems, not only this contrast between actualized fact and all that, but all problems. You know, when I see an object, I see a garland here. My very perceptual apparatus is atomic. The rays of light which are coming from there, which are being grasped by my eyes, are all atomic. But my perception